Welcome back to the Sean Trey Show. I have a really interesting guest today. Now, would you like to introduce yourself and tell people who you are and what you do?
Cool. Hi, my name is Rick Joaquim. I'm a cinematographer. Yeah, I shoot narrative projects, music videos, and commercials.
Awesome. Now, we were sadly diving into fun conversation before things were rolling, and we had to stop ourselves. But can you say what you said to me about the background, and I'll segue into what I was talking about.
Yeah. So Sean, the first thing that popped up was the guitars in the background, and I was just kind of resonating because music is what got me into cinematography and film, and it's such a weird route, but I find it's quite a common route sometimes. Is music kind of, I guess it's creative, so it's creative fields. But yeah, music is what got me here as a cinematographer.
That's awesome. And I feel like there's this natural progression. Like a lot of people now, you know, it used to be that coming up through the system, people would kind of work up these levels and there were real progressions, and that, you know, to get to a DOP, and like back in the 80s and 70s and 60s, like the people shooting music videos were, you know, it wasn't like something that you had your friend do. You know, you didn't run out with a camera. It was like, it was the record labels were producing this. I mean, and again, let's be real. In the 60s, it wasn't really music videos. You know, it would have been music videos kicked off in the 80s with MTV, but it was that whole vibe of, you know, it was a big production, you know, and like a lot of singers were only on TV or only getting videos out when it was on like Johnny Carson or something, you know, like these bigger venues. But now there's this avenue for moving into the industry through music, and it's a really common route. Now tell me, how did you get going that way? So
I kind of used to play drums in so many bands growing up. I've been playing drums for half my life, and I played in a few like folk bands and rock bands and metal bands, as you do as a kid. And what I ended up doing is I ended up shooting music videos for my own bands and for my friends' bands, and it just kind of snowballed, and before I knew it, I was shooting like lots of music videos, and the music videos led to short films, which finally led to commercials and more short films, and then finally I did 2 features recently. I've done 2 feature films. But if I look back at it, music has been that golden thread the whole way through, and music is what kind of opened many doors, so it's pretty cool.
I love that. I really love that because you know, and I think that's the thing is, people were telling me when I started this podcast, because I was doing music and film and other creative arts too, people were like, pick one. And I was like, but I love both, and I do both, you know, and I feel like so often there is a common thread between, like let's be real. Let's imagine, you know, any type of creative professions, they're all essentially connected in some way. Writers support the films that we're in, and, you know, lyricists support the songs. And so, you know, the writers are connected there. And then you get, you know, music videos, let's be real, most singers are going to have dancers in them. Yeah. You know, and so then there's your connection to dance, and then, you know, and then dance goes on to Broadway, and Broadway goes on to it. So there is literally this big web between all the creative arts that I think is beautiful.
Yeah, I agree. I resonate with that so much. Also, like, even as a cinematographer, it's so nice to know what kind of music's going to be used, or know what kind of feel's going to be there. So if I'm shooting a scene and I know that the director's going to go for a certain sound or a certain effect or certain music kind of score, it's so good for me to know that, because then I know, oh, maybe handheld will support this a little bit more. Maybe a really slow zoom will help kind of bring this in, or slow track in. So I think it is so important to think of that sometimes. And again, sound is half the battle sometimes, and I know I've come to accept that long time ago, because sound was always so important for me. So yeah, I totally agree.
And there's an interesting thing, like even move my mic a little closer, because one of the things that people forget is like that there is that component of sound in filmmaking. And I tell people, like, if you want to make a movie, you have to have certain components. First of all, you have to have a great script. That's probably starting point.
Yeah, story is king.
You should probably, story's king. You should probably have some pretty good actors, because let's be real, otherwise it's like, hey, give me back my, you know, it's like, really, you know, it doesn't sell it unless you have good actors. You got to have great cinematography. It's essential, because otherwise it's just, you know, and then there's all these other things. But if you don't have good sound, it's one of the things that I think that people get really slammed on too. But we're here to talk cameras.
That was an amazing route we just went. That was great.
No, I know. It's beautiful. Like, and I think that with music, I was talking about my guitar on the wall, and there was something special about it, right? Because this is a 1969 Yamaha Red Label. It's actually a cheap guitar, because even though it's old, even though it's vintage, it's not considered desirable. And there's this preconceived idea about what people have about what is valuable. And it's not even real. You know what I mean? Like, hang on, for me, it's like what matters is the sound. And again, spinning this back into cinema and cinematography, it's a thought concept that I've been circling back on lately too, because as people make film, we've entered an age where people aren't playing by the rules, and you don't have to. And one of the really cool things with cinematography is like, there are so many tools out there. You can do it any way you want.
I agree. It's such an exciting time, Sean. I think like I'm so fortunate to be a cinematographer around now, because just the way technology is just moving forward and moving it used to be, had I been born 30 years or 40 years ago, I probably would not have become a cinematographer. But now, because cameras have become so more accessible and technology is pushing so much more, you really can go buy a prosumer camera. And I use that term lightly because a lot of prosumer cameras now are Netflix approved. You've got so many companies, I won't mention any names, but you've got so many companies doing amazing things. And I love that. I love that it's opened doors for so many people who wouldn't always have those opportunities. And I'm one of those. I didn't go to a fancy film school. I didn't get to attend. I don't have any family in the film business. But the way technology kind of trickled down, and I was like a DSLR child, like the 5D, when that 5D came out, that kind of taught me everything I kind of knew about it. So
right.
I agree.
Yeah, right. And I feel you. I feel you as well, man. Like, I didn't have. I was like, I started out my film making. I was working as an actor in LA, and then all of a sudden, the economic crisis hit in 2008, and all of the studios moved out of LA. And so now there were a bunch of out-of-work actors, and I was just working at a company, and I was working at I was going to graduate school and working at a spa, like a hair salon. It was actually a really cool building. Like, it was a nuts building. It was like old Hollywood style, and like upstairs they would have the Oscar parties. It was really fun, right? But they were really getting slammed because Facebook was really coming in, and all of these other studios around town, or salons around town, were just killing it with like video content. It was just, YouTube was really cranking up. And so I said, well, buy me a flip cam. It was like one of those, it was like way back where you press the button and a USB flips out. And I was making videos that were actually really drawing people into the business. And it was like, and you know, editing on iMovie, I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, this is fun, simple enough. But I was really cranking like numbers up for people. And it was funny because at that time, people were still going for like the more traditional model. And so my boss then was like, video's great. And so she went out and hired a team to do it. But they put so much money into the production and only got 3 videos. And so there was this traditional thinking, it was still has to be, everything has to be expensive and big instead of being smart. Now, how did you get started in this industry? Like, let's go back before music videos. What made you go, you know, did you grow up with photography? When did you get your first camera?
That's a brilliant question. It's kind of a weird one because, like I said, no one in my family really was into cinematography or like really are creatives. My parents are like working class kind of. I mean, I love them. My parents have done so much for my brother and I, like growing up, and I have so much respect for that. But they weren't really creatives, and I never thought cinematography or the film business like could be an opportunity or an avenue for me.
Yeah.
So I remember like I used to love a lot of TV as a kid. I think most people do, but I was addicted to watching like cartoons and watching TV. I used to love Star Wars. I used to watch Ninja Turtles.
What was your cartoon? Ninja Turtles.
Ninja Turtles was amazing. I remember watching like the old X-Men cartoons on Saturdays, like when you could watch like kids shows in the mornings. I remember like watching so much stuff as a kid, and I remember like having my mom and dad would hire like VHS, like old cassettes, and from the video store around the corner, and my brother and I would just watch it constantly.
Did you watch DuckTales or Tailspin?
I love Tailspin. I used to watch so many cartoons, Sean. I was so into. A big part of me also still resonates with animation to this day, and I still love so much animation. But I think that kind of instilled a big part of me. And then I remember my brother and I used to borrow our parents' like little video camera and shoot like little funny little kind of stop motion videos, or try to shoot little like things with like He-Man toys, and like, I don't know, we would just do really silly things. So I think a big part of me had always been fascinated by it, but I never realized it was an avenue for me until I got to like my early 20s, and then I realized I could do this, and that's when music kind of took me to that route. So it's a strange one for me because I didn't really. Yeah. It went a bit backwards. I kind of fell in love with video. Then I started realizing photography is just as important, and photography and video are almost the same rules. And once you start learning that, it was quite a mind-opening experience for me.
That's really cool. Yeah, I think that that's something that's really interesting to see how people get started, because there's always seeds that are planted somewhere, and you don't know where those seeds are going to come from. It could be like for you, like the love of cartoons, man, and that resonates with me, man. I remember growing up and just sitting in front of those TVs for hours, and it was funny because it was also where I was learning the narrative structure. And you don't think about that, but yet you're getting those stories, and they are creating this story arc. And let's be real, like, maybe not all the cartoons were that great all the time, but there was always, you have a solid protagonist, antagonist, and then you have a story arc.
You have a beginning, a middle, and an end. You're so right, Sean. That's so true. I've never thought about that. That's a brilliant comment.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm so proud. I got one good comment
it's so
tonight.
True. And I think also animation it doesn't really have a ceiling sometimes, because it's animation. You really can do anything. You could do anyone. Yeah. You could be anything and be anywhere. And I really sort of like love that. I love that it was like there were no limits.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, but and they really play with that. I remember, and one of the things that I remember when I was a kid was that there were these series of books that my mom bought me that were about famous people, and it was really interesting because I would read them, and then she would make us do little drawings of them, and it wasn't it was like this interesting creative outlet. You learn about people and you create these narratives, and I love that. And I think now you see kids that are getting this too. And another area of really great studying of the narrative structure is in video games. And there's just such a great narrative structure.
And I think, and the quality of video games and the animatics in between games, just to talk about that, is amazing. I love what's happening. There's little mini movies that happen between. I'm like, this is gorgeous. All games in themselves, the quality is just amazing now.
My daughter was watching the new Miles Morales video game. But the movie from it, like the animated movie that put at the beginning of the video game, I was like, what is this? There's a new movie out? And it was like 30 minutes. It's like, it was ridiculously long. And she's like, I don't know, it's for a video game, I think. And I was like, oh, wow, whoa, that's really good. It was so well done. Now, coming back to you said that you didn't, your parents were very not creative, but then you were also getting into music. Where were the seeds of creativity coming there? Because I want to know where were you getting
it's a great question. That's a great question. I guess, when I say they're not creative, obviously they listen to music, and I always grew up listening to music around the house. They would, but they're not musicians per se, and they never played anything. But I guess they've always supported us, which is amazing. And I remember even now, it's such a funny point in my career as a cinematographer. Like, when I first wanted to do this, my parents were like a bit nervous. They're like, are you sure this is the route you want to go? Like, once you're down this route, like, it's kind of hard to kind of turn around. And I remember my dad asking, like, what are you going to do for a living? Like not to knock any other careers and stuff, but he's like, you don't want to get stuck, for example, shooting weddings until you're an old person, like an old man or whatever. And I was like, no, I'm sure there's a career path to this. And now I look back, and like some of the commercials I shoot or the TV stuff I shoot goes to, for example, I've got a Netflix project coming out. My parents are so proud of that, and I think they finally get it. They finally saw how those kind of things all that hard work I was doing now is finally paid off. So it was kind of cool, but I think they've always just supported me. And I think music maybe just came from friends, and you kind of have there's something I do miss from not playing in bands anymore, and I miss this, is you have like a kind of circle, or you have like this camaraderie when you're in a band, and you're almost like a brotherhood, if you want to call it that. And I do miss that, and I guess I've traded that in for filmmakers now, another crew, and I have crew members who become your friends. But I do miss that element of music. It was very much a special thing to experience when you're all on stage together, playing together, and you're just in the pockets, and everyone just knows it's a really special thing.
Yeah. And I think that it's similar with the crew, but it's different. I think that when you're playing music together, there's this, but almost like a euphoria. You get that vibe that everyone's feeding off each other. And I think the challenge with cinema is that you sometimes don't get that until you see the end product. You know what I mean? And so you're working, and on the day it might be stressful, but when you see it at the end, you're like, yes, we did it. But, maybe when you're watching the dailies, so what I mean? Maybe there's that. And
sometimes I guess what you're saying as well, Sean, which I totally agree with, is sometimes like you and the director, or for example, a director's been in this project so much longer than you have, and then you kind of join a little bit later on, and then you as the cinematographer know exactly where you want to take it, what you're kind of going for with the story, and how you want to shoot it. And sometimes you do have crew members who are just day players. They've only been there for a few days, or they've joined the project very recently, and they kind of are giving input. And you're like, no, you don't understand. This is a discussion that's happened 2 or 3 months ago. There's a reason why we are shooting it in this way. So sometimes it is hard because you see the end goal, but someone who's been with you only for a few days is trying to give you input, and you're like, no, trust me, there's a reason why we're shooting it like this, or there's a reason why we're using this effect or this lens. So I totally agree with you. I get what you're saying.
And it's a really interesting point, because that's really, there's always been there was this really funny comedy clip that was on Instagram, and it was just these two like influencer kids that were like making a TikTok video, but it was really hilarious because it was a director and a DOP, and they were kind of like talking about who was in control. And it was like the director's like, yeah, we're gonna do this, and the DOP's like, sure. And and there was this back and forth, because it really is, and it's one of the beautiful things. It's a joke, but at the same time, there's also the cool part. I'm circling back on it. The DOP has such a beautiful level of influence on the storytelling that a lot of people don't fully understand. And like the joke of this thing was like, the DOP, the director is shaping the narrative, he's working with the actors, but the DOP is shaping the storytelling through the visuals. And it's equally powerful.
I agree with that so much. And I think there's a lot of responsibility on you sometimes as a DOP, and there really is, because you're choosing the lensing, you're choosing the angle, you're choosing if it's going to be handled, if you're going to push in, how are you approaching this? And for me as a cinematographer, I feel through the lens. I've come to realize that in my own work, is I feel through that lens, and that's what makes me feel like I'm connecting to an actor's performance. And I sometimes build relationships with an actor or actress on set, and I realize this after the last 2 films now, that sometimes they'll look at me as a mirror and they'll go, how was that? And you'll go like, yeah, that was a good one. Or sometimes you'll go, let's go for one more. And you start building this relationship. And I never want to step on directors' toes, because that's their world. And my world is obviously to support the director's vision and do beautiful visuals. But at the same time, you do realize that when you're in this magical little dance with an actor or actress, and they're giving you this amazing performance, and you there, and you kind of you feel it, and you're both in this dance. An actor or actress starts looking at you as an operator or as a DOP, and you start feeling this, and you realize that you're in there with them, and they trust you, and if they trust you, they will look to you sometimes. So it is quite an important role. It's something I wouldn't change for the world, but it's definitely a thing where you always have to watch and check yourself sometimes, because sometimes I do want to give a note and go, ooh, that's the director's note. Let me not step on toes here.
Yeah. And it's really interesting, because one of the beautiful things though is that that you pointed out is that there is this, I feel like a lot on set. There was this really great video on Instagram the other day that was it was just this great transition where I don't know, if I find it I'll send it to you, but it starts off with this couple is coming down the stairs, and they've got this crane fully extended through the doorway, and they pull back on the crane, and it's not a crane, it's a jib, and the guy's sitting on the front operating the cam, and they come under the doorway and back in, and there's a pass off from one boom operator to the next room, there's another boom operator, and it was just this really smooth shot as this couple comes down the stair in this house and through the doorway. And one of the things that I thought of when I saw that is, wow, that looks like a dance. Because there is this absolute choreography between the camera team and the actors, like this dance between them. Do you have any thoughts on that?
It's so true, and it really is, because you've got, Sean, you're so right, there's so many moving parts. Like you're saying with this move, for example, that's probably like, so that they were probably tracking back and jibbing down on the dolly while doing this, while the actor or actress is coming down the stairs, while someone's operating, while the focus puller's keeping everyone sharp. There's so many moving parts. So it really is magical when you just get something in the can, and it's just, everyone just goes, you know what, that was amazing. And it's obviously you'll go for one more for safety, but sometimes everyone just sits there and goes, that was the one. And there really is something really magical about when everything just works, and the performance is in the right place. Focus was sharp. Everything was in focus. The operating was great. Everyone was just in this magical. I think that's what makes filmmaking so special. And for me, cinematography so special, because even as a DP, as the DOP, I have to treat my camera department and my crew almost like a parent, if that, for lack of a better word. But I've got different children. I need to give attention to my lighting, attention to my camera team, attention to my grips, and you're making sure that all departments are playing well. So then they support you, and then therefore you support the story and you support the director.
Now that's a really interesting point, because so many people, like a lot of DPs talk about, their cameras and this angle, but like literally the director of photography is the person who, director is managing the whole thing. But then you get, your first AD is over here controlling the actors, the set, the movement of things. The DP is over here, and he's really on top of the grips. He's on top of the lighting. He's on top of the camera team. And a lot of people don't, I'm excited. I'm trying to track down some really good grips and, like a best boy and type of things, because I want to get some people on like that, because everyone knows all the glamorous stuff, like some guy shooting on an expensive camera, but like the dude over here that just set up the lighting, it's really important, you know what I mean? And people that are not in cinema don't realize
and people forget there's a whole army. Sean, you're so right. There's a whole army of people behind you sometimes on a film, and people don't realize this. And it really does takes a village sometimes to make a film. So sometimes people think it's just the director's film or the DOP's film, but you forget there's a whole team behind holding everyone up and supporting everyone, almost like a little triangle, which is amazing.
And it's like you sit down, and I love, and now that I've worked behind the camera, I always sit through the credits on films.
Yeah,
I always sit through the credits because those people put their lives into that film, and it's a beautiful thing to see. Maybe you don't know the names, but it's like it's solidarity, it's respect. It's that time of shared respect. Now, what is your favorite part of being a director of photography? What is the part that really excites you the most? I mean, is it the camera moves? Is it the gear? Is it the lighting? Is it colors? What do you really vibe on?
Sean, such a good question again. Cinematography, I guess, what speaks to me is it is probably all those things you've spoken about. And I think to be a good cinematographer, you have to have this, you have to be part scientist, where you have to understand the lenses and the technology and the amount of lighting you need, and you need all those things. But you also need to be an artist as well, and you need to be able to understand how are you creating, how are you building a world with your director, how are you painting with light, because there's no point having all these amazing tools and having the right lenses, but then not knowing how to use them and not knowing how to express yourself and create something with it. So it's probably somewhere in the middle that I love falling, because I can geek out and nerd out like the best of them. I love lenses, I love cameras, I can talk about color science, I can talk about all these things that excite me. But at the same time, also sometimes love talking about how it makes me feel, and how there's a certain color and why we chose pushing towards cold tones with a bit of warm tones, or what does color contrast mean to you, or why we ended up going for anamorphic lenses, because they kind of make people feel claustrophobic. So once you are motivating why you make those technical choices and use them in a creative way, I think that's why cinematography speaks to me so much. And building a world, I think, is something so special in that. And prep time, when I get to build a world as a director and they trust me, it's an amazing experience, an amazing feeling when they go, you know what, that was a great idea. And they allow you to keep putting in input, and you just help supporting them.
There was I didn't realize how... When I look back, some of the most happy accidents were some of the best things that happened in my life. My sophomore year in high school, we had an English teacher that was really good. And then he quit. Halfway through the school year, he got promoted to this university, and it was a much better position, and they were like, come on up, we want you to start in December. And so maybe it was October, November, and he just left. And so my school was scrambling to find a new English teacher, and they found this guy, Mr. Funkhauser.
It's a good
greatest
name.
name
That's
ever.
An amazing name.
Mr. Funkhauser is an awesome name. Mr. Funkhauser was the worst English teacher on the planet. I love him. But he did not know what he was doing. He had just graduated from university. I remember just graduating from university, and they threw him into a class of people that were just not much younger than him. And we had a couple kids in my class that were eating him alive. And so he was struggling. But what he did was he's like, well, we're going to have movie appreciation. So my entire, is it sophomore or junior? It's junior year. My entire junior year, we watched movies. And we watched good movies. Like, he was showing us Alfred Hitchcock. We were watching North by Northwest. We watched The Birds. We watched Orson Welles. We watched, all of these. Citizen Kane by Orson Welles. And we watched all these amazing films that now I look back and go, oh my gosh. But I remember, like, that was the first time I was really exposed to cinematography, was when we watched, The Birds and North by Northwest. And I didn't realize, I mean, Hitchcock there was some really crazy stuff he was doing with his cameras. He was really picking the angles, and they were picking all these things to really accentuate the story. And people don't realize, like, how a different way to shoot can really affect things. And I think one of the best movies that, can be a great example of that is probably, which is the greatest money-making movie of all time, is Blair Witch Project. And they had no budget. And one of their brilliant things was they shot with a cheap handheld, and they realized, what's scary? What's the scariest thing in cinema? What's the scariest thing in life?
Yeah.
What you can't see. And it was just this brilliant use of, like, handheld, and then after that, a lot of other people were starting to really push into it. But what are some historical movies that you really like? Now that was good.
That was, I mean, number one, you mentioned so many good films. There's so many of the Hitchcock films. It's amazing, by the way, just off topic for 2 seconds. We actually staying in Leytonstone. So I've just recently moved to London, and I'm staying in an area called Leytonstone in London, and that's where Hitchcock grew up as a kid. So we went on a trip the other day, a little neighborhood tour, and Hitchcock is actually, they've got little murals of Hitchcock on the tube, on the train stations here, which is amazing. And I found out he recently grew up here as a kid. Really cool. But going back to some of the films, I love Hitchcock films.
Can I dive into a side story too then? So I grew up in the Napa Valley, and Napa Valley is in Northern California. Well, if you go straight west from the Napa Valley where I lived and went to university, my mom and brother still live there. You go straight west, you end up in this little town called Bodega Bay. Bodega Bay is famous for one thing. It's where the Birds was shot. And you can go out and see where the old house was. You can see, where the Tides, like, restaurant where they were getting attacked by the birds at the very, like, final stand.
Yeah.
We would go eat there all the time. You can stand in there. And so it's like, it was just so cool to see these places in real life. So that's awesome, man.
That's how I feel sometimes, because you always forget, like, you always think these people are on, like, a pedestal. You imagine they're so far away, and then you realize, this person also grew up in down the street from here, or literally I'm standing where someone like that stood, and it breaks that, like, that wall where you're like, well, actually, it's not so far away. It's actually possible. It really is a possible future for any of us. So I love that.
That's my point. And that's what I wanted with this podcast, because there was, like, a thing, like, one of my dream things, like, I was thinking about how to grow this podcast. And one of the things that I would love to do with this someday, I would love to turn it into, like, a TV show. But, like, one of the things I would like to do is still keep these interviews going, but I'd love to go somewhere and see people's real life and humanize people. Like, Simu Liu, the guy from Shang-Chi, the big thing, the star, he plays volleyball. I grew up playing volleyball. I was like, damn, I'd love to go have a game of volleyball with that guy, and it's just like, it'd be so cool. Like, and he's got on his Instagram, he's playing volleyball with his friends. And I was like, what I really respect about him is, like, even though he's, like, one of the biggest stars in the world right now, he's still just hanging out with the same core group of people playing volleyball. He's still just the same guy. And
I love that,
man. Yeah. Because it makes it feel accessible.
Exactly. And we all just aren't just human beings at the end of the day. Everyone really is just another human being. We all deal with the same things and go through the same things. So I really do resonate with that.
Now, your movies, I really was enjoying deep diving into the stuff that you put up on your website. Talk to me about some of the stuff that you've been shooting recently, because it's super cool.
Thank you for that. Yeah, so I recently moved from South Africa to London. So I've just been based in the UK now, so now I'm London based. But I grew up in South Africa most of my life. I shot a short film called Five Tiger that went to Sundance the beginning of this year. That was an amazing experience. Sadly, we couldn't attend just because of the pandemic. So the whole festival was online, which was a bit of a shame. But it was amazing to have a short film in Sundance. And then after I've done a few other short films, done a few other projects, I've done pretty well in festivals. And then from those projects, I got asked to do my first Netflix project as well. So I've just shot it's a little bit different. I normally do more kind of drama stuff or more action-based stuff or science fiction. I'm a big science fiction fan. But I got asked to do a romantic comedy, which I don't normally do romantic comedy. But it was my first Netflix project, and you're not going to say no when Netflix comes knocking. Straight away said yes, and I was like, I'd love to. And I spent about 45 days back in South Africa shooting a romantic comedy, and it comes out next month. It's called Little Big Mouth. It has nothing to do with the animation series, but it's called Little Big Mouth, and it's a romantic comedy coming out next month. And it was such an amazing experience. Just experience how Netflix shoots and how much prep goes into Netflix projects, because no one talks about this. You always hear about 4K acquisition and all the rules, but it was amazing to work out like a kind of a workflow and what kind of camera we'd use, what's our acquisition format at the end of the day, what lenses can we use, what lenses can we not use. That was really special. So yeah, I love narrative. I've always grown up, I mean, I still consider myself a young cinematographer, but I've always done commercials and music videos, but narrative is really what I want to do. I really love storytelling. I'm
with you on that, man. I think it was really interesting because when I was looking at Five Tigers, there were some really interesting shots. I was really focused on the outdoor shot where she was cutting. I don't know if it was sugarcane or if it was some type of plants. And it was just the tones, the colors you were using, and just the angles were just beautiful. Now, how did you go about making those choices? That's what I always love to know, because these choices can be very different. You know, are you shooting wide? Are you tight? And why are you shooting tight? Why did you make that choice? Because this is when, and I want to compliment you on this, because I was watching the trailer for the short film that you had on your page. I haven't seen the full short yet. I will try to track it down. But you know, it seemed like there was some type of suspense of this character was dealing with something. I was like, is there a crime? Is there something? And I see this hacking with this knife, and I knew something was being hacked, but for a second I was like, hang on, what's going to happen when we pull back and I get the reveal? Like, is this plants or are they hacking something else? So I was like, well done camera choice. And I don't know if that was on purpose, but I'm assuming
thank
it was.
you for that. I'm so glad that kind of comes through, Sean. That's amazing. So thank you for the kind words. And it is quite, I don't want to give away the plot too much of the film, but it's dealing definitely with something quite heavy. It's definitely dealing with quite a heavy topic, and how this mother has to almost do anything to kind of survive. And then I wanted that to come across, because this woman is being a strong female character, but she has many things, and there's many things going on. Her husband is sick, her daughter's going to a private school, which she's trying to afford to give the best for her child. And I think so many people can resonate with that. And sometimes in this life, in the day and age, it's like we want the best for everyone else around us, but it's tough because sometimes it puts a lot of weight on your own shoulders. So I tried to make her often. I did this really fun thing, I believe I did, is I would contrast really wide shots and make her feel very small and almost lost in the world, and then I would jump into really tight close-ups, and that jarring contrast between wide and close, it builds tension, it adds tension, and it also it can sometimes make her feel lost, but at the same time feel claustrophobic, and I love that idea.
Yes, and that's what I was noticing. I was going to ask you about that, because I was noticing the use of wide shots, and the wide shots, one of the things is like when you get up into an airplane and you look down at the world, and the airport is suddenly so small and everything's so small, and it's a little bit. I remember once I was flying out of LAX and I looked down and I saw where my house was, and I was like, all my problems are so tiny. And like, again, it's that perspective. And that's one of the beautiful things that you're able to do with these lenses, is that you're able to play with that, you know? Suddenly this person's this tiny little thing in this giant wide scene.
Yeah, so, and we also shot anamorphic, which I think, Sean, lends itself to that kind of that genre that I love. I love anamorphic lenses. And Panavision in Johannesburg kind of sponsored us a bit of kit. They kind of gave us a really nice discount because it was a short film. We didn't have the biggest of budgets. And anamorphics are just, they talk to me so much, and just that aspect ratio, that 2:3:9 is just one of my favorite aspect ratios, and I felt it was the right choice for this film. Yeah, and I know that like a lot of young filmmakers are like shooting just 16:9 and then adding black bars in post, and I'm not judging that, but there is something so nice about anamorphic when it's an actual, it's and the depth of field and the way lenses, the lenses almost pop and distort the image. There's something really special. And I was actually talking to someone recently. I was saying there's a reason why anamorphic is probably in our generation or my generation is like, I'm so fond of it, because we grew up watching films like this. We grew up watching films that were all shot on anamorphics. So from Star Wars to any other films, a lot of films are being shot on anamorphic. And I think it talks to me at least, going, wow, that's cinema for me at least. And I remember thinking that's really beautiful. I know aspect ratios are coming and changing all the time. I think the new Netflix standard is at 2:1 or 2:1. It's like thin little black bars on top. 16:9 has a resurgence. 4:3 has come back again. Everyone's just, I think it's another way, obviously, to express yourself. But for me, 2:3:9 is such a beautiful aspect ratio. I just love that widescreen format. I think it looks gorgeous. Yeah. What was it that I was one of the ones I absolutely loved? It wasn't
It wasn't anamorphic. I mean, it was a really set of special lenses. I can't remember what it was that he shot on. But Tarantino, for Hateful Eight, shot on a really special set of lenses. I remember watching the making of, but it was just getting this absolutely insane wide.
I'm trying to think if it was 65. I wonder if it was the 65 or the 70mm lenses. I'm trying to remember what they were, but I remember it was something really special. I don't think it was anamorphic. I'm trying to think. It might have just been spherical, but large format.
I think it wasn't anamorphic.
Medium format lenses. I think it might have been those.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the way they're shooting the Mandalorian right now.
That is probably one of my favorite shows just right now. I know we're talking about favorite things, but
hands down,
there's a whole generation of Star Wars fans have just come from this, and I think it's about time, because don't get me wrong, I've always loved the old films and I love the prequels, but the Mandalorian has just tied everything back together, which I think you and I probably grew up loving, and it's just back again. It's just yeah.
When I'm not gonna lie, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. And I'm not giving away no spoilers, but the end of season 2, like I was just like, the world is right. The world is right.
All is right
Things
again.
Are
yeah,
okay.
Everything's back to normal somewhat.
Everything's okay. The other movies are just okay. Yeah, I won't go into that, but I loved it. Yeah, and I think what Jon Favreau and
Dave Filoni. Yeah.
What's his name? Dave Filoni are doing right. They're telling great stories.
If you took away the amazing, I mean, it's beautifully shot. Greg Fraser and I think Baz Luhrmann shoot it. Agree with Sean. It would still be good, even if it wasn't shot really well. It's obviously shot beautifully. It's tremendously shot, and the technology behind it with the whole virtual sets. I love everything they're doing. I'm trying to get into that as well. I'm trying to learn about it. I've recently visited ARRI London, which is up north, and they have some of the virtual sets, and I'm trying to get my head around how they shoot with virtual sets and stuff. But like you said, again, it comes down to storytelling, and storytelling is key. And The Mandalorian has amazing characters, and it just has amazing writing. They tick so many boxes.
Well, and what they did is, I think that one of the things that they remembered too in that series is that Star Wars was essentially it was essentially kind of trying, George Lucas was kind of modeling that after some samurai movies, and they went back to, what was it, the second episode of The Mandalorian was pretty much straight out of the Lone Wolf and Cub, like samurai movies, the Ogami Ito, like the baby cart in the road to Hades it's like the second episode is almost exactly the same as that, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm geeking out over here, and then
it's so good.
Yeah, and then there was the third episode or fourth episode was essentially Seven Samurai, protecting the village from raiders.
Exactly. And like even saying with the previous ones, like he literally, it's got elements of samurai films, which also meets Western. Like a lone person will walk into a bar and he'd be challenged by people, and then literally there'll be a little gunslinging battle. I love that stuff. It's so cool. It's done so well. Well.
No, so I hope that both of us can end up on the Mandalorian.
That is the dream. That is the dream. There's actually something I've heard. There's up north. I think they start shooting there's a new Star Wars project starting up north of the UK, and I'm trying my hardest to get onto that, because I think I would die just to be on a Star Wars project one day. I think it's called The Acolytes. I think they start shooting The Acolytes soon.
Yeah. That's the new one of the High Republic.
Yeah, I'm excited.
That's awesome,
for that.
Man. I'm not gonna lie, if I got cast or was able to be a crew or anything on that, I would literally go in costume the whole time. I don't care.
Same. I think, I don't know, Star Wars for life. I always will be. Yeah.
Why is the new guy dressed like a Jedi?
Yeah. he's like, what is he even doing? Yeah, exactly. I just look at the call sheet and this makes no sense. But anyway, living their best life.
Right? Totally, man. Now that kind of plays into a question that I've been asking a lot of people that I'd love to ask you too. Like, if you had like Aladdin's lamp and could wish for anything, what would you wish for?
That's such a good question. Does it have to be career related? Does it have to be life related? Can be anything.
Let's do the first wish needs to be career related.
Probably something to do with Star Wars. I'd literally wish to be a part of the next Star Wars project, or wish to have been part of some of the previous Star Wars projects. I mean, I've always personally loved Return of the Jedi, but The Empire Strikes Back, the way it's shot is so beautiful. So I would have loved to have been part of that. So something like that, or Mandalorian, or something. So I would probably turn back the clock and go be part of those things, if it's career related, or just possibly just hope for a good career for myself. And I mean, it doesn't have to be on that level, but I would love to be part of something that just speaks to me as a cinematographer, and I'm so proud of it. I got to world build, and I got to build the next galaxy or next universe with something.
That's something I was talking to. I'm just editing. I'm halfway through the video. I'll finish that up and post it tonight. a video with a production designer. It was really awesome interview. And we were talking about world building and how world building is this integral part of cinema. You reference it. She's been doing Why the Last Man, and so it's just a really cool project. And again, really fleshing out this universe that these characters exist in is such a cool thing. And I mean, and the cinematographer has a huge part of that, because you're the one painting with light.
And there's something so special, and like it's so weird. I'm signed on to another science fiction short film now, starting in I think 2 or 3 weeks in the UK, and they literally are like having so many chats at once already, and we obviously in prep now. And what's so funny about it is, like, Sean, I'm part of so many discussions and so many chats because I have to be. I have to discuss the set design and the set build. I have to discuss like the wardrobe, because those are colors that affect my crew as well. And I'm obviously have to talk about the crew. I have to talk about cameras. I have to talk about equipment. I have to talk about story. So there's so many discussions I have to have as a cinematographer, which I'm so grateful for. But you forget how much a part of it you have to be, because you have to go, well, actually we need a window there because I would love natural light to push in, or I don't want any windows. We want to try to keep this super clean and clinical and not see outside. There's so many things you have to think about as a cinematographer, and you have to motivate. So it's always interesting.
Now, if you could go back in time to a younger version of yourself, not changing anything, we're not going full Loki here, but like you want to go back to kind of give yourself some advice. What advice would you give yourself?
That's a good question. I guess I'd probably just go back maybe 10 or 15 years and just, if I can't change anything, I'll just say maybe stop putting so much pressure on oneself. And that's something I'm very guilty of. I feel sometimes I love what I do. I'm very grateful to have found a career that's both a hobby / a passion / a career / it's all encompassing. And cinematography is all encompassing. And the more I meet cinematographers older than me and I look up to, the more they say you have to give it your all, you have to give it 100%. But I think the downside to it is sometimes I do put a lot of pressure on myself, and I expect a certain level from my work or a project. And sometimes if a project doesn't turn out the way I wanted it to, I envision it to be, it's a bit disappointing, a little bit disheartening sometimes when you go, oh, this project could have been so much more, but the editor did this weird thing, or the grade wasn't finalized. Those things happen sometimes. So I'm just realizing, like, maybe don't sweat the small stuff sometimes, and don't put so much pressure on myself, because at the end of the day, it does take as long as it takes. And I think this career it's just one of those things. It's going to take as long as it takes. And I think if you really care about it, you will get there in the end. And no one's path is the same. We all have different paths and different routes.
Right. And that's so true. I was coming up through the Hollywood system as an actor. And one of the things that was like always striking me was this, is like, there is this preaching of things need to go a certain way, that this system, everyone's path has to look the same. You need to sit there and do this, and you got to wait for this. And I was like, that was one of the reasons I left LA and moved overseas, was just like, it's not true, man. I'm going to go and work a different angle. And then that angle took off and I worked this angle. And I think that people need to just validate themselves for the hustle, for doing what they can,
I agree. Because there's no way. I mean, there are lucky few who have one big project and it can break them. But I think often when you look back really hard at everyone, most people have been doing these things for X amount of years and they've been working. There's always a back catalog, and you look at it and you go, actually, they've been continuously just working until he or she finally broke, and then they had an opportunity. But I think the common thread I'm noticing is it just takes time, and I think there is hard work that has to be done. There always has to be that strong foundation.
Now, I really enjoyed, I want to talk about a couple of your other projects, like that Western you did. There was a Western in South Africa. Talk to me about that, because that was really beautifully shot.
That was called The Stranger. That was a really fun project. Actually, a proof of concept that I believe the producer and the director are shopping around to Netflix. They're trying to get it sold. So if anyone's listening from there, cool. Please help us. That project is really cool, and it's based on history, because South Africa has such a weird history. So I grew up in South Africa, but there was a lot of warfare, especially like hundreds of years ago. But there was the Afrikaans Boer War, where the British and the South Africans were fighting, and I think that's what the whole film was basically based on. It was based on this kind of I wouldn't say rogue, but he's kind of left the British Army and he's kind of neither here nor there. And it's a really, really really cool short film. And I just loved shooting that genre. I'd never tackled anything like that. And shooting a Western was, I think 90% of our short film was
outside.
Yeah, outside. Most of it was exterior. And I loved doing that. I loved shooting a Western. It was such a fun experience. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. And it was beautiful. It was really it was interesting because one of the things too, like one of the, I think for anyone coming up in cinema, one of the TV shows that I say watch for concept. If you want to be a screenwriter, if you want to do directing, and people might not fully understand this when I first say it, but I'll explain why. WandaVision. WandaVision is a masterclass in theme. In the idea of what makes something, you know. So you're shooting a 1950s TV show. Well, what are the elements that have to be there? You know, what were the lenses they were doing? What was the coloring? What was all of there was so much to it. And it's like when you think about the specific requirements that are needed for any type of production. You know, Westerns have a different thing. That's their calling card. You know, there has to be a certain types of shots that a Western will have, you know. And so I love WandaVision for that. And I was like, and when I was watching your short, I was like, well, you got it. And what was strange though, is that you got it, but it was done not in the old West America. It was done in South Africa, but it was obviously still, you watch it and go, this is a Western, because it has that
There's almost tropes that you kind of, well, not tropes, but you do learn certain things and you kind of observe this. And I remember me and the director speaking and we were like, well, what are certain things that all Westerns kind of have or should have, or we've always felt accustomed to? And there's these big sweeping landscape shots and then these nice, beautiful close-ups of kind of when that you have stare off or a gun battle is about to happen. And there was many things we kind of just wanted to tick as well, but also at the same time, make a film that felt true to us and also feel true as a South African film at the same time. So you're so right, Sean. That's a really, really good point. And just be WandaVision, by the way, that's Jess Hall. He's ASC, BSc. He is an amazing cinematographer. He's an amazing cinematographer. I'm a big fan of his work, by the way. Yeah,
it was, and I think like, and I'm still doing my master's in screenwriting right now, and I love writing, and I'm constantly writing. One of the things that was in that semester, I was working on studying Westerns. I was actually one of my I have a script that I've been working on for a while that I absolutely love, and it's a Western. It's kind of a Western meets Moulin Rouge, and so it's a story of a bunch of women in the Old West. And one of the things is, as I was writing that, I was just constantly, you know, it wasn't until WandaVision that I was like, I had a deeper understanding of the certain things that are required to create a context and a certain vibe. And so I was sitting there looking at my Western, and it just allowed me to kind of revamp it. But I was going through and reading all of these old Western scripts, you know, what was it? Fantastic. I'm trying to think of the English name. Magnificent Seven was the English version of the Seven Samurai. A great movie. And then I was rereading the script for Unforgiven, which is brilliant. Also a great one. And you're right. And No Country for Old Men, which is also actually...
It's a modern Western. No, I totally agree.
It's a modern Western. Yeah, so, oh, God, all of those are just shot so well, too.
Because often what I love for No Country for Old Men, speaking of that, is like often, also, I think that's Roger Deakins, also amazing cinematography, but there's these standoff moments where you feel someone will walk into a space and there'll be a standoff, and then you won't know if they're both going to survive or one's going to survive, and then they'll leave. And there was something really amazing about that film. Those are some of the scenes I recall, and I just remember thinking, what a beautiful film. So, yeah.
There's a scene in that movie that is just so powerful, and it's probably one of the scenes in a movie that causes so much anxiety, and it's such a simple scene where I can't remember the name, but the main protagonist, the guy that what's his name right now? I'm blanking on names. The main bad guy, the walking around the air. What's that?
I know.
What's that
I want to
actor's
guess,
name?
but I can't remember. I do know who you're talking about.
I can't remember. All right, so the actor's going around, and he's got this scene where he's flipping the coin, and he's at the gas station with the old man.
That scene. Yep.
And the old man's like, he's like, "How you doing today?" And he's like, Why do you want to know? And it's just it's so much tension. And one of the things that's so amazing about it is it's so simple. And like some of the best cinema, you introduce concepts that don't have to be radical, but like here this guy, and one of the dialogue in that scene is brilliant. And like the bad guy is pretty much telling him, this is the most important day in your life. This is the most important moment. And you don't even realize it. You don't realize that this coin is the most important coin. And he flips the coin and it's like heads, okay, you win. And the guy's like about ready to put the coin aside. He's like, no, that coin, you need to frame that coin. You need to put it somewhere special because that coin should be special to you. Don't just get rid of it.
It's such an amazing scene. Yeah, it's just so brilliant. It's just done so well.
Now, what type of genre would you like to dive into? What would be the thing that you can go, you know what, I would really like to try this besides Star Wars? And you said you're doing some sci-fi.
So obviously,
but are there other
so
types?
So then also fantasy. I'm a big fantasy fan. I think, like for me, Sean, I've done quite a bit of action stuff. I've done lots of action short films. Now with doing a romantic comedy as a feature, I've done some sci-fi projects. I think I would love to do some superhero stuff. I know that's kind of on the same kind of path, but there's something.
Awesome.
I'd love to one day experience a Marvel film. I know that probably comes with a lot of politics and a lot of red tape and stuff, and you kind of are working with a studio very closely and VFX departments. But a part of me would love to do that because I think there must be such a fun journey knowing that this is the expectations, and now you have to match them and how you still somewhat squeeze your voice in there. So yeah, I'd love something like that. I always will love drama. I think I'll always enjoy drama. And then I've shot comedy a few times, but I think comedy for me, it has to be really good comedy. I'm not always a fan of slapstick. I rather enjoy maybe dark comedy or kind of more like kind of dry stuff. So I think that's always spoken to me. But yeah, I'd love to do Western stuff. I'd love to do more fantasy. I'd love to do anything, those kind of worlds. I'm quite open-minded. I've always kind of been quite an adaptive cinematographer. I'm very like I love being open to things, and I love being adaptable, and I think that's one of my strengths is I can play well with others, and I enjoy getting along with the different people and putting on different hats and trying to go, actually I see where they're going. And I love references, so if someone sends me like a truckload of references, I normally try to siphon them down and filter them and go, oh, I see what they're going for this clean kind of style, or they're going for a dark, gritty, moody style. I'm really good at deciphering that, and that's part of your job, I find, as a cinematographer as well, is to decipher what the director and whoever the producer wants, what kind of film they want to make.
And that's the thing too, is like I was there was one of these great statements, like for young directors, one of the most important thing for a new director is an experienced cinematographer, because you know the idea of having a vision and being able to really share that vision and capture that vision are very different things. You can have this perfect idea about what you want to do, but making that happen and making it happen in each of the different shots you need and the different angles you need, and it's more challenging than people realize. And there's a system to it.
That's an amazing comment. And there's times where I've been there where you feel that the director trusts you inherently, and you feel that. And when that's there, it's a really amazing place. But sometimes when you're doing your first job with someone, they are a little bit more hesitant, and they kind of don't want to give you all that trust. Or sometimes I work with directors who I sometimes feel are like kind of undercover DOPs or cinematographers, and I feel like they want to be very in control of the camera and they want to dictate the lenses, and that sometimes makes my job a bit more difficult, because now you've got a director saying, I want to shoot this on a 35mm, and you're like, actually I think we maybe go longer, let's go on a longer lens to kind of compress them and make them feel closer to the background, they feel more claustrophobic. So sometimes it's tricky when there's not that relationship there. So I obviously always look out for people's body of work, but you also always want to look out for their personality sometimes, because at the end of the day, you're going to war with these people. And I'm not just talking about directors, I'm talking about the producers, the production designers, your whole crew. You're going to war with these people, and you want to be in the trenches with them, and you somewhat want to enjoy them. You want to be around people because you're going to probably see them more than your friends and your family. So you want to somehow resonate and get along. That's
a good point. I remember one of the last big features I was on in LA, it was just a team. And it was like every day we woke up for 6 months. 6 months we all were there slogging through it together. And when it was done, it was like there was this big hole. You know what I mean? But you are in the trenches with them. From the person at Crafty to the person, to the director, to the to the second AD, to the PAs, everyone. All the people are in the trenches with you. And That's a great way to
and
put it,
you
man.
do feel that loss. And Sean, I
love
felt that
analogy.
now after the last two films. So I did a film in Zambia for 45 days, and then the last film I just did in South Africa for Netflix. And you feel that bit of that loss afterwards because you get so used to seeing these people and you get into this rhythm of seeing everyone and working with everyone that you do kind of miss them because you go, well, that's over. And now it's a whole new family and you start all over again. But it is tough when you do kind of lose everyone. You're like, oh, I do actually miss. It's a weird feeling. You're so relieved to be done with the project, but at the same time, you're like, oh, I kind of got used to it.
Right. Yeah, I love that, man. Well, this has been an awesome conversation. And honestly, I'd love to have you back
Thanks,
on
Sean.
sometime,
Yeah,
and we can talk more
I'd love
things.
to. Thank you so
More
much.
more things, gear and lenses and all that. There's just so much to
Yeah.
discuss, man. It's just
I know
where
we
do you go
didn't
with
even
it
touch
all?
on the technical stuff. We barely
No,
touched on so much, but yeah, thank you so much, Sean. Yeah, it was amazing.
Do you have any last bits of advice that you'd love to share with people that might be looking at getting into
I
cinematography?
think it maybe just goes back full circle to what we spoke about, is that things are so accessible now, and you can really create your own stuff, and you really can create your own content, your own short films, your own music videos, and for example, me as a cinematographer, the more I create, the better I'll get. Cinematography is just one of those things. It just, you have to just keep creating and getting better and kind of attuning your taste and your talent and your natural kind of voice and your skill. So I think just keep shooting and keep making stuff. And I know it sounds cliche, but really just shoot with the best camera you can get your hands on, or any camera you can get your hands on. And be it just your phone or be it whatever you can get your hands on, it really will make you a better cinematographer.
I love that, man.